the inner work really matters, and you have to have it as a part of your public speaking journey wherever you are. So it's not just how do I do this and this and that, but like get into that mindset work, get into that, and know that that's going to be a huge part of your journey.
Welcome to Oversharing with Rhonda, a podcast to amplify the voices of trailblazing women. My name is Rhonda Khan, and I believe in the power of authenticity, vulnerability, and storytelling to connect the masses. As a public speaking coach, speech therapist, performer, mom, and chronic oversharer, I'm often empowering others to own their stories. And what I found is that the most transformative change happens when we share our journeys while being unapologetically ourselves.
Real talk, top 4 questions I get when I tell people I'm a public speaking coach. How do I get started as a public speaker? How do I become more confident? How do I book engagements? How do I get paid? All very, very important questions to be asking on your journey. But I am here to tell you that if you haven't done your inner work, none of the answers to these questions matter. What do I mean by inner work? Well, before you even speak, do you believe your words are worthy? Do you believe that you belong in the room? Do you know how to navigate your imposter syndrome? Can you recover compassionately after having a bad day or a bad presentation? Are your words and talks and messages actually aligned with who you are? Are you speaking from a place of intentionality and authenticity, or are you putting on presenter mode? Listen, if any of those questions resonated with you, today is your day. Now, you know how I feel about this. I have all the tips, tricks, and strategies, but they will not be effective if you haven't answered these questions and done your inner work. On today's episode of Oversharing with Rhonda, I discuss why doing the inner work is essential to your public speaking journey. This episode originally was an Instagram Live, so if you hear me saying, "Girl, you already know," imagine that I am talking to you.
Today, we are talking about why inner work is critical to your public speaking journey. It is so important. You hear a lot of people talking about public speaking, whether you like it, whether you love it. You think about, oh, you're on a stage or on a virtual stage and you're speaking and you're impacting people. Some people may know that, yes, this can be something that can be part of me growing a business or part of me growing expanding the people that I reach in my work. And you may have heard, if you have been paying attention to some of my work, some of the clients that I serve, how people actually get money. They get paid really well to speak and to impact and move the people. If you're just joining me for the first time, my name is Rhonda Khan. I'm a public speaking coach that amplifies the voices of women of color. And I have been talking about different things that we need to do to impact our public speaking growth. So today, what I want to talk about is why inner work is incredibly important. Inner work, I mean, like before you even open your mouth, before you say anything, before you craft a talk, before you decide. Now, I want to remind everyone that public speaking is anything that requires you to talk publicly in front of people. So it could be, a meeting, it could be a podcast, it could be an interview, or it could be speaking in front of many people. And so what I have happen with me, I tell people what I do. I say, hey, I'm a public speaking coach, XYZ. I say why. And then they're like, great, I'd like to do that, or I'd like to get into that, or I really want to know how to book speaking engagements and how to grow. And they're really thinking about that end goal, that outcome, the last part of it. And what I have found is that they have missed doing the very important inner work that it takes to not only craft and create the message, but also to build themselves up to be able to step into the room. And so I have all the tips and the tricks and the tools. I got a couple things up my sleeve. I'm a licensed trained speech pathologist. I'm a trained actor. I incorporate so many different tools into how I help people own the room, the stage, the screen, and all these different things. But what I say is that if you don't believe that you belong in the room, then none of this stuff is going to work. Like none of it. Like none of it's going to work. And I have found that in my life. I've found that in my clients and all of their different experiences on all the levels. Even the most experienced speakers have to do their inner work. But what I find with everybody, there's a place for everybody, and there's a time and place that you need different things. Like there are different speaker programs that are like, this is how you get booked and busy, and this is how you do this, and this is how you do this. And the Catalyst Academy, my program, incorporates all of that. It incorporates the inner work, the skill sets and the frameworks, and how you get out there and book and grow and grow. But I see a lot of times people skipping that step. And what happens is you'll get somewhere in your journey, like you may end up speaking, but it may be really difficult for you, even if you got through it, because you're like, okay, then what do I do next? Or once I get to this level, the imposter syndrome, if you believe that exists for you, or self-doubt, or all the negative, or whatever it is, starts to come, and you probably start limiting your own self from growing. That very much involves things like, okay, I got this big engagement. I got to the next level. Now what do I do? And so you might, if you're doubting yourself and you haven't done your inner work, maybe you're undercharging, or maybe you're not operating or providing the value at the fullest potential because you don't think you're supposed to be there. Or maybe you're not going for the opportunities that you're really going to find your target audience. You're really going to find your impact because you think, oh, I'm not ready just yet, and that kind of thing. And so that's why the inner work is so critically important, because no matter where you are along your public speaking journey, you are going to have to fall back on those things. And I will tell you, for even myself, as I grow, I'm still continuing to be confronted with like, Rhonda, are you really doing this? Or are you going back to your old patterns and your old frameworks? Are you really owning your voice like you say, like you teach people to actually do? Are you doing this? And so it's very important that this stays in your journey. So let me break it down. I have 3 steps that could probably get you started on what this inner work is, this inner work to become a better public speaker and to really grow, which you'll need across your journey. And the very first step, it sounds simple because it can be, is own who you are. It's a phrase, right? We're always talking about own this, own that, but it is so incredibly important to own who you are, because what I find with people starting out or even seasoned is that they're looking left, they're looking right, and they think like, if I'm going to be a speaker, I need to be like that kind of speaker. Like, name some of your favorite speakers, some speakers that you know and love and would love. You're like, oh, if I can do X, Y, and Z. I'll tell you some. I love me some Brene Brown. She's an incredible storyteller, and like the way she connects storytelling and being a researcher academic is like, I'll listen to Brene Brown while I'm cleaning and stuff. Oprah, the Obamas. There's so many really, really great speakers, but what we like about them and what we think we want to get from them is what they have figured out for themselves. And so they have figured it out. What is the thing that they have to own? What is the thing that they have to do? What is the thing that they uniquely only can provide, and how they can uniquely provide that? And then they double down on that strength, and they've grown from it. Like they've created their space from owning that very, very, very thing. And if you think about some of the people, like I see, remember you put Oprah on here, like obviously Oprah has had over 30, 40 years in journalism and her shows and everything she's done. And so she's like been a student of herself, but Oprah absolutely is Oprah every time she shows up. And she has varying levels of authenticity and intentionality, which is her favorite word, that she shows up. But Oprah knows how to do Oprah. What you got to do is know how to do you. And it's hard because you kind of know that, like we innately all know that in some spaces. But what happens is we think we got to switch it. We think as soon as we show up, online or in a space, we got to be like, okay, here's you've heard me talk about this. If you follow me, like the presenter mode comes in, or like, oh, I got to come in like this or that. And while there are tools in your toolkit that you can show up and bring anytime if you need to like give a little bit more of this or changing your intention, people are wanting to hear you speak because you are you. They are wanting your unique experience and the way you do it. For instance, I'm an incredibly energetic person when I speak. When I speak, I get energy. I'm naturally an extrovert, so there's that. But there's also like, this is my space where I'm connected with my gift. And so I could be tired, I could be so tired and drained, but somebody asked me to speak. I said, hey, everybody, like it just happens with me. And I give a lot of energy. I'm deeply passionate. I'm all facial expressions and I'm comedy, not intentionally. I'm silly. I'm goofy, but this is a Rhonda thing, right? So I figured out Rhonda. Whenever I'm in doubt and I'm trying to I'm not leaning into my strengths, and usually it's when I'm intimidated or feeling like I don't belong, which is stuff we talk about in the way that I do public speaking. Some other girl shows up and she's not as effective. She's not as Rhonda. She's not as impactful as I would be because I'm feeling whatever. And so like maybe my shoulders are raising up because I'm feeling insecure, or maybe I'm putting on a higher resonated voice because, I'm going back to some little girl, like something like whatever it is, that kind of stuff will show up. And so nobody wants that. They want this. They want that version of you, those parts of you, the way you do that. And so you have to ask yourself, like, what is about me that I can really own? Like, am I a person who loves to use big, long, high academic Merriam-Webster dictionary words, and that's how I speak naturally? Well, then be that. Be that. Make them people look it up when they listen to talk to you. Are you really serious? And you're a serious person who doesn't like to crack a joke except for it's a dry humor. Be that. Double down on that. Are you like over prepared and that kind of person? There's nothing wrong with that. Like be that too. But what you want to do is really lean into it and own it and stop trying to be other things. If you start to try to be other things, it doesn't work for you. It won't work. And everybody can see it. We can detect. And not to say that you're intentionally being insincere, because there are ways that we all have been, I guess, socialized to put on different masks, as you say, which I talk about in the Catalyst Academy. We talk about like the mask we wear and the mask that, especially if you're a Black person of color, marginalized group, you're going to feel like you got to be, or whatever people have told you. So like it takes a lot of that, which brings me to my second point. First, you have to own who you are to do that inner work. The second thing is detach from any narratives that have been inserted into you or placed to you to make you believe that you have to show up in whatever kind of way. And this is the deep work. This is the deep work. And you got to really sit with that. And for those of you who have done some coaching or therapy or anything like that, you probably like, yep. I know what you're talking about. And because there's a narrative that either has, society has placed, maybe your family has placed on you. Maybe there's like expectations of like what you personally should be as you, or you as whatever demographic you fall under. And you have to like be like, no, detach and be like, no, that's not the narrative. Because what usually is happening is that narrative is keeping you from moving forward. That narrative is the same narrative that's like, I want to speak about this, or I want to show up as this, but that but is the narrative. Yeah. There's so much of all of that that's happening. And so you're always in a space of like masking, and you really have to do your best to take off a lot of those layers, because what your audience, and that could be the person in the meeting, or that could be the group of like 2,000 people on this major Zoom keynote that you're doing. They want that person that is not attached to the narrative, that is not attached to that narrative. And so you have to start thinking like, what are the narratives that I've been told or that I've assumed about me? I'll speak for myself. One of the narratives that I used to have, and it took me like most of my 20s and almost all of my 30s to figure out, is that, I don't have to be the good girl, the being likable, or being like whatever I thought was likable or people pleasing would be what people wanted to see. And that was very much me. Like I had to be this way. Like I being like the nice and like not stepping on toes and not, I had some type of belief that like, this is how you make people like you, by being very nice and very, very palatable, very, very receivable. When in reality, if I was owning who I was, we talked about the first step, then I'd be like, Rhonda, that is not you at all. That is not the women you came up with. That is not part of you. It's you feeling like you have to do that. And so I'm just like, no, I'm actually a very deeply passionate, fiery, opinionated, loud, emotional kind of being. And like, that's how I'm rolling. And I don't like, there may be people they're not down with that, but there are also people who are like, give me more, second helping of that. And so I don't need to have that narrative that tells me how I need to show up in spaces. Here's how it shows up when you're speaking. And I see this all the time, and I'm going to keep talking about it until I stop seeing it. I'm on a mission to get everybody's take off presentation mode, especially Black women and women of color. They'll be like, oh, all of this like really open, giving person, just like all this energy that my body is showing. And then as soon as it's time to speak, the moment it's time to speak, a whole different person comes through that's like without the life and the energy and the passion. And I'm just like, who is this girl? Go get the other one. Go get the other one. What is happening? What is happening? And it's because likely you haven't owned who you are. You haven't done that work, and you're attached to that previous narrative of who you think you are supposed to be. And unfortunately, sometimes people will feed that narrative for you. They'll feed it, and they'll like, it may have worked for you. It may have worked it worked for me to be the nice girl because but I thought that it made people like me, and people did respond in that way. But what it did was keep me in a box. It kept me in a box. It kept me limited. It kept me held back to really do the things that I was meant to do. It kept me playing small. It kept me feeling small. And so it took some work of being like, how can I rewrite this narrative? How can I create a new narrative, create a new conversation about myself that is not at all related to what that is? And it takes work. And that is, again, a big part of how we started the Catalyst Academy, where we talk about that inner work that has to be done. And I know some people are like, well, I've been in therapy. I'm doing my work. I'm doing my coaching. But guess what? It's an ongoing process. It'll keep showing up because as you get to the very, very next level, you're going to be confronted with that again. And so you're going to have to go back, create new narratives, and keep strengthening that muscle. And that's very, very important. The third thing we need to do is to really eliminate those thoughts and behaviors that don't serve you. And this is completely aligned with the narrative conversation. And so there's a narrative that shows up. There's like, to be accepted, I need to be X, Y, and Z. When I show up in this room with these people, with men, it's this way. When I show up in the room with all white people, it's like all these different narratives. When I show up with elders, it's this way, it's that way. And there's that piece. And there's also like different specific thoughts that you hold about yourself that you probably aren't even aware of, that you're just speaking out into the world, and you're feeding that thought. And so the thought becomes a reality. And this is what I get a lot. And if you want like me to, go off, like if you're like, I'm not the person who XYZ, I'm not a blah, blah, blah person, I'll be like, who says, but there's often, I hear this and I chuckle about it because they're like, oh, I'm not the public speaking person, or I'm not the person who likes to be in the front. This is what I heard somebody say the other day. And I just looked at her because she knew I was coming for her. I want to be in the background. Or there's nothing wrong with loving the operations and the building and stuff like that. But if you're saying that you are not that person, I'm just curious, who says that? Who has told you that? Who said, right? Who said? Who said though? Who said that? Who says that you're not that person? You're deciding that. Is how much is that thought limiting you? How much is that limiting you from growing to say that, to create that limitation for yourself? And I catch myself doing it all the time with like multiple things. Like, well, I'm not good at this. So for instance, I have friends who call me in on it, and that's what you need. You need to invest in yourself. You need to have a community that will call you in. You need coaching and, things like that. But I talk about my business journey a lot, and I'm growing really rapidly, which is really like, I'm so grateful. And also, whoa. And many people in the business world, the entrepreneurial world, not everybody, some came from like a corporate America background. And that's a lot. That's a huge voice. Not everybody, but there's a huge voice. And so my little narrative that I created was, I always be like, well, I didn't come from corporate America, so X, Y, Z, 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 Z. I didn't come from corporate America, so blah, 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 blah. I have friends that's like, so what? But look what you've done. But I'm like, but I always limit it in terms of like leadership, in terms of like knowing operations and knowing how things work. And I'm just like, look, let me just speak to the people. I don't want to do all that. And she's like, no, but you're doing it and you have done it. And so you need to have people who can reframe that, or you reframe it for yourself. And I'm sure there are things that you've told yourself, like, well, I just can't stand. And like, if you say that about yourself, that's great. but just know that I'm coming for you. If you're talking to me, you're like, I'm just not a public speaker. I'm just not into that. Why? Because everybody's a public speaker in some ways. You may not want to be a working public speaker in that way, but like everybody has had to speak in front of people at some spaces in their lives. And so I don't want to hear it. And so, because I need you to tell me why. I need you to tell me why this narrative is serving you, because it's probably not. But pay attention to yourself as you grow. And as you grow, think about like, what are the things I'm saying to myself that are keeping me there? And so let's say you're already in the public speaking game, whatever that is, right? You're starting to book engagements, whether it's speaking at a panel, whether it's doing a workshop or training for someone or something like that. And the big opportunities are starting to come, because that's really what some of the people that might be on here like, well, I'm doing my work, Rhonda, but the bigger stuff starts to come. Guess what comes back? The same narrative. That same narrative is going to come back and be like, hey, sis, and pop you on the shoulder. And you have to really be like, I recognize this. This means that, and it's fear, right? I've talked about this in previous IG lives. Fear is thinking it's protecting you from something scary. Fear doesn't know the difference between you like potentially getting hit by a bus and you like standing up in front of, a major company speaking, or standing up in front of like, doing a media appearance. Like they don't know. Whatever fear is, doesn't know. And so you have to just call it right there and just be like, this is what's happening. And then when you are armed with those tools, you're just like, okay, so what is the narrative that's showing up right now? Right? If you've done your work, then you know how to access it. What's this narrative? Yeah, it's probably saying that like, who am I to do this? Usually that's what comes up. Who am I to do this? Who am I? Like, why are they choosing me? It's a mistake, whatever imposter syndrome or whatever's coming up. And like, who's that coming from? Okay. So how can I reframe this narrative? Right? I'm equipped to be in this role. I'm equipped to be in this position. I am equipped. I am qualified. I am excellent at what I do. Even if you don't believe it, even if you think it's like blah, blah, woo, woo, affirmation talk, say it anyway, because it works. It's science. Just start saying that. Start having your Rolodex, how old am I? Of affirmations on a list. Just start going there. Just start being like, okay, this is a narrative. Okay, this is it. And have people around you that will call it for you if you're having that doubt. It's a narrative. This is this. Okay. Yep. It is a big deal that I'm speaking on MSNBC today. Yeah, that is a big deal. I'm naturally afraid because I'm on national TV. Like, this is major. This is major for me. Okay. So of course I'm afraid. Of course I'm having this doubt. So what's the narrative? Okay. So the narrative is that I feel like, they found me by accident, or maybe I'm just good at talking to people. That's my narrative that comes up. I'm just good at talking to people. That's how my imposter syndrome shows up, but I'm not qualified. Lies. But, and so like, what's the real narrative? The real narrative is that everything I've done up until this point has gotten me here. Every step I've taken, every hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, I am qualified through experience, through training, through skills. This is time. And my purpose here is to do X, Y, and Z. That's how you reframe that. And then you do it. And you might probably still, you might probably still be afraid. That's the thing. You might probably still be afraid, but that's okay. You're supposed to. It's scary to do this stuff, but that don't mean you don't do it. That doesn't mean you don't do it. Okay. So wrapping up, for those of you who just joined, we were talking about how important the inner work is to public speaking, how important it is to do these things. And the three things I mentioned is you have to absolutely own who you are. You have to know what those unique parts and those unique things that only you can do, that only you can offer, that only the way you can do it. Those speakers that you love so much and you look for, they have figured that out for themselves and they are doing the best them. You figured out how to do the best you. Second, you need to detach, cut them off, these narratives. Tell them they are lies. The narratives that society, that your family or whoever else has placed upon you and is trying to oppress you with, because sometimes these narratives are oppressive. Listen, whatever those narratives are, you need to be like, no to them, no, and reframe them to like, actually, this is the narrative. This is the new narrative. And finally, catch those thoughts and behaviors that you're having when you are getting into the space. So like, you can rewrite the narrative, but like, sometimes it happens right away. Like, girl, you don't need to be doing this. That voice of fear, of insecurity, of negativity. In my workshops, I often say to name that voice. Mine is Tish, and I'd be like, here comes Tish talking X, Y, and Z. I know it. I hear it. Sometimes she's really slick though, because she knows me, because we've been working for a while. So she knows that I'm coming for her just as much as she's coming for me. So she's being, as the higher up I get, the more crafty and legitimate she sounds. And so it's really hard to detach from that. But absolutely, that is what you have to do, is detach from that narrative and reframe that. So all of this inner work, all of this, which is critically important to your public speaking, is a huge part of the Catalyst Academy, my incubator for women of color. We start with inner work. We start with inner work because it doesn't matter. All the tips, tricks, tools, and all those things. If you don't believe you belong in the room, if you don't believe your words are worthy, nothing matters. It don't matter at all. Tish is attention grabby. I'm just like, Tish, go sit down somewhere. Nobody need to hear from you. But all of the inner work really matters, and you have to have it as a part of your public speaking journey wherever you are. So it's not just how do I do this and this and that, but like get into that mindset work, get into that, and know that that's going to be a huge part of your journey. Now, I get way deeper into that into the Catalyst Academy, and we are accepting brand new members. We're accepting new members into the Catalyst Academy. You have to apply, because I want you to be armed with the tools to do this. I don't want you to feel like you have to, hodgepodge together what you need to do. I know that it's a process. It's a journey. It takes time. And I believe that you can do the work. I look forward to seeing you there. If this is something that's the next part of your journey,
to do the inner work, you have to own who you are, detach from old narratives, rewrite some new ones, and catch those thoughts and behaviors that do not serve you. In the Catalyst Academy, my 12-month public speaking incubator for women of color leaders, we start with the inner work. We are collectively amplifying our speaker platforms to do world-changing work, and we want to activate you to do the same. To join us, go to bit.ly/The Catalyst Academy Pod. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. Bye.